Welcome back to Great Expectations. Your foundation training and document basics is what we're going over now. And now we're on to lesson 5. And now we finally get into a little bit of meat and potatoes, something that's a little more fun, because we're going to go over the agreement of sale, very commonly called the AOS. Some people call it the contract or the offer. So this is a little more fun simply because it's about getting business. The other documents were all state required documents. So I will go on with this for a little bit. If it gets too long, I'll break it up into 2 parts for you here too. But this is the agreement sale for Delaware residential properties. We don't want to rehash everything you learned in pre-licensing, but just keep in mind we're not attorneys. We have legal right to fill in the blanks. So that's what this is. It's fill in the blanks. There's lots of nuances with it, but let's go over very basically. A lot of it's self-explanatory, but let's just kind of review it and go over it and have some fun. All right, so we have parties. Yes, that's not a pool party. It is who's involved in the sale. So you're going to have the seller, and that's going to be all sellers' names. What I would do with this, and if you're preparing this document, you're probably, most likely, a buyer's agent. You're working with buyers. It's going to be you as a buyer's agent who needs to prepare this document, which is, again, let's keep in mind, right now it's the agreement of sale for Delaware residential property. When you fill it out and have your buyer sign it, it's an offer, and that's all it is. So you could say I've sent over, if you call up an agent, and it's just, let me just put on a little more light on me here. There we go. If you call up an agent and say, hey, I have a contract for you, yeah, you're kind of wrong. Actually, you are wrong. You could say, I have an offer for you. And that's how you should learn right from the start as a new agent. When you're speaking to another agent, the listing agent, you should say, I have an offer for you. So it's just a little technicality. But you're going to put in the party's names, the seller. Now, where are you going to get the seller's name from? What I always recommend is that on your MLS you have tax records. That's a separate, usually a separate button to click. Put in the property under a search 123 in the tax records, 123 Apple Blossom Lane, and you will find the owner. And I would use those names. The way they put it in the tax records is usually the way the seller wants a legal name used. So whereas you may see on the I wouldn't just go by what's on the trend sheet. I would want to see what's in the tax records for a couple reasons. One, what their legal name is. You may see on the MLS it says Jim Smith. When you go into the tax records it says James R. Smith Jr. Well, that means that there's a senior, and on the tax records or on the official documents he prefers to use that to differentiate him from dad. The second reason is that you are protecting your clients. You want to make sure there's no mistakes. You want to make sure that the people selling the house actually have the right to sell the house. You have a common, now how could that be? A common one? A divorce. You know, she moved out, he's still at the house. He puts it on the market, and the listing agent, for whatever reason, didn't bother to look into the tax records. And by the way, if you, just on a side note, if you ever get that call, come list me, or I'm thinking about putting my house on the market, the very first thing you do is pull out the tax records. Pull them out, print them out as a PDF, put it into your online folder somewhere, and just save that. And one of the things you're going to do is make sure that the name on the tax records matches who's calling you and who's talking to you. You want to make sure that those two things jive. Okay, that's the first thing you're always going to do. So go in there and make sure that the sellers have the right to sell. So the example I was using is she moved out. He wants to sell the house. He didn't tell the listing agent, you know, they're in the middle of divorce or anything like that. The listing agent didn't look at the tax records. Shame on that listing agent. But it now says, you know, Jim Smith. When you get to the tax records, it says the owners of the house are James Smith and Marlene Smith. Well, you're going to need both of those signatures on the sale. So on a listing agreement to start with. But just for spelling and for correct legal names, Go into the tax records and find that. All right, then you're going to put down their current address if you have it. It's not going to break a contract if you don't have this address. Now, normally it's, if the house being sold is 123 Apple Blossom Lane, that's also their address. But sometimes you're selling houses where they live in North Carolina and the house they're selling up here is something they're now renting out. They used to live here, now they're renting it out, but their mailing address is North Carolina. All right, then you're going to put in the buyer's name. Same thing. When you're sitting there with your buyers, ask them how they want their name to appear for a legal document. So, yeah, and they could always be changed by the attorneys when we get closer to settlement. But also, if you have an address for them, put that in too. Now, if I see an agreement of sale that just has the seller's names here and the buyer's names here with no address, it's not going to cancel the contract out or make it incomplete. You should always have as complete a contract as you can, but that's not going to be a pertinent fact. All right, now let's move down. The tax parcel number. You want to make sure that you correctly get this right. Again, I always like going into the tax records, pulling that out when an offer is about to be made so I can compare it. The tax parcel is on the MLS. That's usually correct. 99.9% of the time, it's correct. But it never hurts to just double check. When you're typing it in here, this is something you don't want to type over fast. You want to make sure to just kind of give it a second glance and make sure you got the right amount of digits in there. It's the same as what you see on the MLS or in the tax records. Okay, being situated in, and you're going to just simply list what county it's in. Of course, you're going to spell Newcastle correctly. So, and then further identified as 123 Apple Blossom Lane. Now this here is what's being sold. Has nothing to do with this or this. So this you want to make sure you get right, because again, the sellers could live in Florida and selling an old home they're renting out now, or maybe they own 3 homes and this is just one of them, and they say, it's time to go down to 2 homes. Good problem. But this is what's actually being sold. Okay, the payment terms. Right here, this is your offer. Whoops. As a side note, what I was always taught by attorneys and accountants is to be accurate. So I'd like you to start being accurate as well. Now, if you want to, just for be able to read it, you can move it over. And the way to be accurate is you want to put in the decimal point and 2 zeros behind it. No one's offering change. I do see a lot of, I'm not going to kick it back if I see this, but I do see a lot of this. And sometimes I see it just handwritten. I would prefer, and attorneys would prefer, you put in those 2 zeros in there. Unless, of course, they are offering a nickel above. God, man, I hope you don't have those buyers. Then you can put it into 0.5. Okay, now you have a B and a C. Deposit upon signing this agreement. So let's say, let's get rid of that nickel there because that's bothering me. All right. So let's say they're going to put down as their escrow money $3,000. Again, I put in the zeros. If you put that here by B, that means that when you're presenting the offer, the check needs to be included. The escrow check needs to be included with it. You will have a conversation with the listing agent, and after you prepare an offer, you want to make sure you know where the check is going to. There are some people that want the checks to be made out to the attorney. The most common tradition in Delaware is that it's made out to the listing agent's brokerage. So if John Jones is the agent, you don't have your buyers make out the check to John Jones. Absolutely not. But if he or she, well, John, if he works for the XYZ agency LLC, that's what it's going to get made out to, the XYZ agency, the listing agent's office. But here's another. Now again, if it's here on B, that check needs to be cut right then and there and delivered with the contract. So let's look at C, which a lot of people don't use. Deposit due within. Well, this is the one I like doing quite a bit. I like putting in 3 days, and wow, is that small. We'll have to get that fixed. So instead of having it, let's negotiate it out. Okay, and that way that again, if the buyers, sometimes they get excited and they're maybe from another state and they say, well, I didn't bring my checkbook or whatever. You could still get an offer together, and then they could write you a check when you have a good firm grasp on who it's going to. I almost always do this. Of course, my threes are a little larger, and it could be 4 days, it could be 5 days. 3, I think, is very fair and reasonable, and that's within days of acceptance. So let's say you put in the offer and it comes back with a counteroffer 2 days later, and then your folks think about it and you discuss it with them and they come back with a counteroffer a day and a half later. This could go on for a week, week and a half. So this check is not due till everybody says, yep, got it, we're good, it's all signed, it's all initials, and then it's up to you to get that check to the listing office the best way you can. So I like using that, number 3. D, I don't know what type of things you would have, unless there's no deposit, unless for some reason there's no deposit due, seller to agree to all cash at the time of settlement. Something I don't know what you might use that for, but that's just another option for you there too. And before I go any further, just bear with me here. I'm going to just move this a little bit. I just realized that I have a fan in the background here. I'm at our Delaware State office in Dover, and maybe that fan's a little annoying there too. All right. Part 4, inclusions, exclusions. You're going to click, and it says here, if neither column is checked, items shall be considered excluded. You're going to check what should include with the house. So let's say the washer and dryer in the MLS says that it's included. Well, you want to make sure that you click yes, included. Okay, now let's say it doesn't say that the washer and dryer is included. It doesn't say it's not included. And the buyers say, can we ask for it? And your reply is, absolutely, we can ask for it. I don't know if we'll get it, but we can ask for it. By asking for it, you're going to put it there. Oops. Well, for some reason I can't seem to click on the spot I want to, but that's where you'll put it there. Right now we're asking for a trash compactor, but you would put it there. In this scenario here, in this section here, you want to be careful and take your time with this and make sure you've got everything clicked, because to the letter of the law, and again, I like to look at things in the regards of, and as you move forward with me, you'll hear me say this, what happens if the you-know-what hits the fan and you're standing in front of a judge because you've got angry buyers and angry sellers and everything went bad. You want to always protect yourself, so you want to take your time here. I could tell you firsthand when this form first came out, it was a standing model townhouse, and the buyer's agent, I was the listing agent, the buyer's agent clicked screens. Why can't this? There we go. Goodness, you know what? I think maybe I just want to make it a little larger. Maybe that'll help. There we go. Okay, the buyer's agent clicked screens. I saw it, didn't think anything of it, and as we went forward, about 2 weeks before settlement, they did a quick inspection of the house, the buyer's agent and the agents, and the buyer's agent contacted me and said, I still don't see the screens there. And I said, oh okay, I'll the builder must have them somewhere. It was a new construction. The builder must have them somewhere. And so I contacted the builder, and the builder said, I don't supply screens with the window. So now we have an issue because I saw it, didn't even think, to my defense, who would think a builder wouldn't supply screens? But it's legit. This particular builder did not supply screens, and I wouldn't be surprised if there are others. Now, that's just one example, but the point is you want to read these things over. That was an issue that had to be resolved. It did get resolved, but it had to be resolved because of what was there. So you want to double check on that. When you're receiving offers, you want to double check on it as well too. Okay, next section. Additional inclusions. Anything that's not previously checked. Additional exclusions. So let's start with the exclusions. This you could do for the convenience of the sellers, number one. So let's say the MLS sheet specifically says washer dryer excluded, and your buyers say that's fine, we've got a brand new one, we don't need them anyway. So you would put washer and dryer in here. Let's say there's something your buyers don't want in there, and I wouldn't go too nitpicking with it, but let's just say there's a playset. They don't want it. You could put that that's excluded. It's going to be negotiated. The sellers may say, well, I don't feel like taking it down, and there's the real life part of it. But you could add exclusions in here that your buyers don't want to see in the house. Inclusions. Honestly, I've included all kinds of things in here. Now, as a tip, you're going to go into negotiations. So sometimes it's not a bad idea to have what I call crazy chips in there that you could withdraw. So sometimes I may put in the gas outdoor grill or the play set or the John Deere lawnmower. And especially you want to keep your wits about you. Let's say you're showing a house to buyers, and it's a nice young couple. It's on a 3/4 of an acre, big, long, flat backyard, and the couple is retiring and moving to a 55-plus home, or 55-plus community. Maybe they're retiring to Florida, North Carolina. They're probably not going to have a need for that John Deere tractor that's in the garage. So that's also something that the sellers probably won't think of. It'll be down the road during the sale. They're saying, what are we going to do with this tractor? I don't know. I guess we'll just put it up for sale. Or, your buyers move in and they suddenly realize, boy, I'm really tired. After 2 months, I'm tired of pushing a lawnmower. So you, as the realtor, can suggest, not offer, but suggest, hey, how about, listen, these folks, I think, are moving to a 55-plus community in Florida. They're probably not going to need that John Deere. Why don't we ask for it? So maybe sometimes you'll see a freezer in the garage. It doesn't mean that your buyers and you have to try to grab and get everything you can, but sometimes it's not a bad idea to throw some things in there. I would put in things like, if you're not sure about things, I'd put in things like the shed. I have seen people take the shed. Surprises me that you want to go through that trouble, but I've seen people take a shed. All right, next. Is it subject to a lease or not? Is there a tenant in there? You're very often going to be showing houses. So if it is, of course, you're going to click yes. But understand here, it is not if it's not, you're going to click no, is not. And over here, is it subject to any third-party rental lease agreements, such as oil or gas or tank leases or things like that? So if there's propane and they've got a lease on the tank that you're actually the sellers are actually leasing, you want to make sure that's known there. All right, the contingency agreement. This is how it's going to be financed. Now, this is not set in stone, but we've seen you want to include as much as possible. Under the type of financing, you're going to put in the type of loan it is. So if it's a 30-year conventional, then put in 30-year conventional. I see some people just put conventional. That's okay, but all things being equal, if you have a contract that an offer, if you're in multiple offer situation and everyone has conventional loan and your buyers have a 15-year conventional loan, that's a stronger loan. it's your benefit to put that in there. So get into the habit right from the number of years. Normally it's a 30-year conventional loan. But what are some other choices? FHA, that's a government-backed loan where they only have to put down 3%. VA, that's of course the military loan. Things like that. The reason is, you know, and this is from the seller side, if it's a VA or an FHA, there's going to be a little more inspection involved, or a little tighter inspection involved. It's good that the sellers know that. What else? Term. Well, we have term in years here. I always like repeating it, so 15 years or 30 years. It could be that over here I'm going to write 15-year conventional, and down in here I'm going to write, because that's what they want to get, I'm going to write 15 or 30 to be determined. But I'd like to put that 15-year up in here so they know right out of the get-go, even though the term is there. The loan amount. What's the loan amount going to be? Well, if it's a $200,000 house and they're going to be eventually, this has nothing to do with the escrow amount up at the top that we talked about, the 3 days and all that. This is what the loan amount's going to be. So they're going to put in, let's say they're putting 20% down. It's a $200,000 house. 20% of that is 40. At the time of settlement, they're going to be putting down $40,000. So you're going to put in $60,000, and of course we want to have the zeros in there as well too. The maximum loan to value ratio is going to be, on that case, 80. Well, not 90. 80-20. All right, the final receipt for mortgage commitment date. I see mortgages, people ask me, new agents ask, well, what's the date? I like putting whatever the settlement date is about a week before that. Of course, it could certainly come in sooner, but this is a condition of the offer, so this could break a contract. If your settlement's June 30th and you put in June 1st as your commitment date, the other side could say, well, we're out of contract because you did not meet a requirement of the contract, which was receipt of a mortgage commitment. And, you know, if in this day and age, if somebody was nosing around or just said, what, they offer you 200? I'll give you 210. I'll give you 215. Well, maybe they're looking for a reason to break your contract. This could be one way there. So I like, if it's a June 30, I'd like putting in June, 24th, something like that. Make it a work day, a Monday through a Friday, and there too. And it could always be a little before. The buyer will make written application. When are they going to go apply for their mortgage and actually fill out the application? If they have done that already, you could put 0 in there if you want. If they're from out of state and they're not going to get down there, and that's, on a side note, it's one of the things you need to explain to your buyers, that in this day and age, they don't need to sit down, put on a suit and tie and a nice dress and sit down with a mortgage rep. It can be done on the phone. It can be done through email, etc. So they want to apply for the mortgage. So if they haven't applied yet, but certainly they've talked to a mortgage rep, because you as a good buyer's agent did not take them out without them being pre-qualified to purchase a house. So, you want to put, sometimes they may say, well, we'll go down tomorrow. Sure, and still a good idea to start the process. So you may put 1 day in there, 3 days in there. Again, homework, you're going to take this and read it over and understand this. This is what you really want to get to know. And where is it going to be held? Well, this one's going to be held in Kent County. What date and what we say? We're going to have 6:30, and you could put this in any format you want. If you want to actually spell out June, that's fine. Time is of the essence. That means that these dates that you're putting in, you could have your feet held to the fire for, and it means that, agreed by the parties must be met. Failure to meet these dates may result in a waiver of contractual rights or default. That's fancy words from you broke the contract. So you want to understand that time is of the essence. Now, you would think that makes common sense. We finally have a state license, a state agreement of sale in Delaware. We used to have 3 of them. Sussex had their own, Kent had their own, Newcastle had their own, and they were all a little different. I always had an issue with the Kent one because they would have all these dates, what day's the settlement, what day you're going to have the inspections, what day you're going to do this, what day you're going to do that. And then at the end, it says time. It should be noted that time is not of the essence. So in other words, that paragraph always said to me, well, we put in all these dates, but never mind. So time is of the essence keeps you and your buyers and the sellers to their word. All right. How's it going to be conveyed? Well, most of the time it's going to be conveyed in fee simple. The other one is a co-op, which we don't have any co-ops. We have some in Sussex. Or a leasehold subject to an annual ground rent, presently in amount of. If there's any of those things, you fill it in. You're going to read this. Transfer taxes. Transfer taxes in the state of Delaware at the current time is 3%. And by tradition, not by law, by tradition, it's 1.5% paid by the buyer, 1.5% paid by the seller. So they split it. But one party or the other could pay it all. I don't often see it where the seller pays it all, but I have seen it where the buyer pays it all. So you just want to make sure that everything's, they're going to split that. That's just you. Who's going to pay for the deed preparation? This is traditionally different in each county, and I very often will see this come back to me. But who do I represent when I'm writing this offer? Do I represent the buyer or do I represent the seller? The deed preparation costs money. Not big money, but it costs some money. So I will always click the seller to pay. The attorney will look at this and say, okay, that's what sides it's going on. So if the other side negotiates and say, we want the buyer to pay, and in some counties, it's tradition, not law, that the buyer pays. And in other counties, it's tradition that the seller pays, always. And if you live and work in one of these counties exclusively, I very often will hear agents who just say, well, the buyer always pays. You click seller, then they're confused. You click seller, the buyer always pays for the deed preparation. Well, not true. So I like clicking seller if I'm representing the buyer. I save them $200. That's good to me. What the title is going to be like, there's nothing to fill in here. No recording, fair housing. I want you to read all this over, make sure you know it, and then we're going to go over something else here too. Now let's get into the inspection reports. Wood destroying insect. The slang is WDI report. So if you're talking to a paralegal or an attorney or someone else or a home inspector and they say, do you need a WDI? You as a new agent can say, yes. Or if the paralegal says, hey, did the WDI come back in yet? You don't have to frantically start saying, what's a WDI? It's a wood destroying insect. It's also, the other slang is a termite. It's any kind of wood destroying insect. There could be a number of them, but sometimes you'll hear people say, hey, did the termite report come back yet? So it's either yes or no. Now, I like clicking, again, I represent the buyer. I like clicking yes. And this is like some of the other forms. If you click yes, the buyer can have it done if they want and hold the seller to the report and request things. But they don't have to have it done. And that's the way I explain it to the buyers. By clicking no, they can't have it done. One way or the other, they can't have it done. They could go in and have a termite inspection if they want by clicking no, but it's not going to mean anything. It's going to be for informational purposes only. So I always click yes. They don't have to have it done. I always recommend it. Now, with any reports, you as a buyer's agent, you always want to recommend. It's their decision to not have it. The last thing I want to hear any agent saying is, oh, you don't need that report. Oh, you don't need to have a home inspection. I had an agent telling me once, oh, I talk all my buyers out of home inspection reports. They don't need that. They don't need to spend that extra money. Oh my gosh. I can't believe the liability that this agent put himself through. But so I always click yes. So what's going to be in here? Well, you're going to put in when this is going to be delivered. it wants a date. I usually try to put in, a couple, 10 days after ratification. Something like that. I like to keep, sometimes these things, what happens is, let's just say today is September 1st, and you're writing this offer up, and you put in, okay, I'll just put in September 10th, 10 days. Well, the sellers don't review the first offer for 2 days, and then they come back with a counter offer, and then your buyers counter 2 days later, and the sellers counter a day later, and buyers counter a day later. You've just gone 9 days, 8 or 9 days. So now it's September 9th, and you have a ratified contract, and according to this contract, you need a termite inspection within the next 24 hours. So I like putting 10 days, I know it says date here, I like putting 10 days after ratification. And ratification is both parties have come to a meeting of the mind. The home inspection contingency. This is the same scenario with the yes and no. So if they write no, you could have the report, it's just for informational purposes only. If you click yes, you can have the home inspection. I would, if you have buyers who say, do we really need it? I'm going to say yes. Can we get by without it? I'm going to say yes. I would even be, the home inspection is so important to the sale of a house that if buyers were to refuse, and I can't say I've ever had buyers refuse it, if buyers were to refuse it, be adamant about it, I would be drawing up my own little form that says, and we might have one, I think there might be one out there anyway, that I've refused this. I, the buyer, I put their name in there, I refused a home inspection, and sign it and date it. And you sign it and date it as well. So, and if you get in that situation, give me a call or a Voxer and we can talk about it. But it's the same thing here. From when, let me get rid of that. Written report, I like putting 10 days. It's usually the same person very often doing the WDI and the home inspection. Now, the next date is written response from the seller. I like putting 3 days after receipt of report. So in other words, we have 10 days or up to 10 days. Keep that in mind. You don't have to wait. So if you get that home inspection scheduled right away and they get in there and they give you a report in 5 days, you could deliver it. So again, instead of using a hard date, I like keeping it a little more flux so that we can move things along. Written response, 3 days after receipt of initial report. So let's say 5 days goes by. I've got the home inspection report done here. I give it to them. Now they have 3 days, and I think 3 days is plenty to talk about it. Very often, if you got a good agent on the other side, a good listing agent, they'll want to extend that because it may be something like, well, we need the roof repaired and we need the plumbing repaired, and then the agent will call and say, listen, we can't get back to you yet because we want so-and-so roofing to come out and give us a bid, and they can't come out till Friday. That's 4 days, 5 days. So, and of course you're going to say, sure, that's no problem. So what you're doing here is you're filling this in, but understand you want the sale to move through, so that may be altered a little bit. And then written negotiations to be completed by, pick a date, 6 days after initial response or something like that. If there's anything else the buyers have an issue about that you want inspected specifically, you should put it in here. This is a CYA type of thing, but I've had it where it was an old home and it looked like there might be some asbestos covering some pipes, but it wasn't sure. It didn't quite look like it, so we put in there asbestos pipes, possibility of asbestos pipes in basement. All right. It explains all the stuff about what it is. You should go over this part. Major defects, what's considered a major defect, what the consequences are, and what your buyers can do, what your sellers can do. And the reason is a lot of good home inspection companies now will list things as a major defect. And you want to, this is moving on a little bit of buyers here, you want to prep your buyers that when this report comes back, here's how it's going to be written. Major defects, safety issues, things that are noted, things like that. So you just want to tell them that because of the contract written in terms that a major defect can get a buyer out of it. Very often home inspectors will put something as a major defect. The big news you want to tell them, the big message is a major defect doesn't necessarily mean the house is falling down or the house shouldn't be purchased. In fact, you should tell them that, because of the way the contracts are written, that there's something labeled major defects. Home inspectors will label it major defects as well, but it could be a new roof and you just need to lay more shingles on it. House is not falling apart. You're not going to be, sleeping in the rain inside, but you need new shingles. So that could be considered a major defect, but the house is not going to fall apart. Let's move on. Other inspections. And this you're going to click as needed or fill in as needed. So if there's a septic system, if you're on public water, public sewer, you're going to leave this here. Now, as a side note, I was always taught to put something in. Don't leave something blank that someone else could write in. That's not a bad policy to follow. If you send me a contract for review into SkySlope or management system, and these are blank, I'm not going to dismiss it. It's not going to cancel a contract. I'm not going to bounce it back to you. But as a good professional practice, I would write in not applicable or NA. Okay, so again here, site not applicable. If it's on public water, well, the well water is not applicable. But this says checked or yes. Now let's say there's a well and your buyers don't know if they want to have a water test done or not. You're going to strongly recommend they have a water test. But I'm going to put in yes. And it's the same thing. They can have it if they want to. They don't have to have it if they don't want to. But yes gives them the option. Radon contingency. Again, we're going to put in yes. They may or may not want it. Now, radon gathers, and we should have went over this in a radon section here. Radon gathers basically in a basement. So if it's a crawl space or on slab, there probably is no radon disclosure. As a listing agent, you don't need to fill out a radon disclosure. So if it's on slab, meaning there's no basement, or on crawl space, you don't need to have a radon contingency. Now, having said that, the buyers are free to spend their money any way they want in order to satisfy their own comfort level. So let's say the buyers are from out of state and they had neighbors who had a horror experience with radon, and they are really quite afraid of radon because of what they either heard or read or saw, and they say, we want to test for radon, I don't care for what. And it's a slab house or it's a crawl space. I would not talk them out of it. I would tell them, I say, well, it's not really required or mandatory. That's entirely up to you. I'm not sure how useful it will be. Here's why. And you should ask other people about radon. And here's a booklet about radon. But if they want to spend the money to satisfy their own comfort, ease of mind, then that's legit. The last thing you want is to be talking them out of anything. All right, swimming pool contingency, that's if there is a pool and you do want something inspected with it. The duties of the seller, the duties of the buyers. I want you to read this over and start to absorb it. If you have, and I know we're reading legal contracts, but if you have issues about it, questions about it, write them down and get them to me and I'll answer your questions on them. But this just says here, if a seller is, look very quickly, if a seller refused to correct a major defect or a negotiated agreement to correct major defects not agreed to, then you got 5 calendar days. You could tell the seller that you will accept the property with the defect, or hey, thanks for your time. That's what this says here. This says thanks for your time and I'll take my money back. That's what that says there. All right, environmental concerns, buyer's default, seller's default. This is how a buyer can act inappropriately and have the contract broken. And of course, a seller's default is how the seller can act inappropriately and have it contract broken. I'm sorry. Okay, agent disclosure. In this new age now, you need to disclose all agencies. So in here, this is seller's agent is not the agent himself or herself, it's their brokerage. So we're going to put in Long and, did I put a $sign in there? Long and Patterson agency, and then they represent the seller, and then the agent's name is James Smith. And down here, if you're writing this up, you represent the buyer, you're going to put in eXp Realty, and that's fine like that. You don't need of Delaware or anything like that. There we go. And then you're going to put in your name down here. All right, and you're going to put in that you are, and this is the seller's designated agent, you are the buyer's agent, and the buyer's designated agent. So you want all that clicked. Now, this is an important part of the contract just for the sake of disclosure, and this is according to the CIS. So if I see this unfilled, I'm going to bounce that back to you. That I will bounce back to you. All right, succession means, God forbid they die, there's still a contract in place. Real life 101, I've never seen, let's say something did happen. I've never seen, the heirs forced to buy a house. According to this, and that's just nationwide contract law, they are still responsible to buy the house. All right, the brokerage fees are covered here too. What addendums are included? Well, you know right now that the seller's disclosure property condition is going to be signed by your buyers and initialed. The lead paint, and you're going to click, so you're going to click that as well. The radon, you're going to click that as well. These are some other forms we'll talk about later. This you can include. This is the pre-qualification letter. Okay, a mortgage letter with credit check. You could include that. Now, understand that if you X anything here, that's what needs to be delivered to the listing agent and becomes part of this contract. So some people will click that, some people won't. Some people think, oh, well, I'm going to send over a letter, so I'll click it. But understand, you think you're just doing something nice. It really becomes part of the contract, that pre-qualification form. So that's up to you. FHA, VA amendatory language, there's a clause. If it's an FHA amendment or a VA amendment, you're going to have a separate clause. We'll go over that. If the homeowners are paying for a warranty, then you're going to click that and what warranty company you're going to play on. The additional terms and conditions. This is what I call Creative Writing 101. So, hang on one second. There we go. I'm back. Had to take a little water break. Additional terms and conditions, this is what I call creative writing. You could put whatever type of additional terms you want in here within reason. I mean, you can't be something illegal, Seller to verify that the basement is suitable for a meth lab. It's not going to fly. But I say creative writing because if this is something that helps you move an offer forward, then do it, as long as it's legal. So what I usually see in here, the seller will provide the buyer with $6,400 of settlement assistance to be applied at the time of settlement, something like that. So, and I'll just talk about that for a minute. Whenever you're writing a clause, and that's really what you're doing here, you're writing a clause, you want to be specific. You don't want to say seller to give buyer $6,000. That's not correct. And if you are taking that as a listing agent, because as a listing agent, you're going to be getting these offers in, you want that changed. I would want it spelled out, and I would bounce that. Well, if everything's signed, but I would be instructing you as to how that can be done better. So I have seen that, literally seen that. Seller to give buyer, $8,000. That says nothing. For what? When? Why? You see? So the contract gets broken. And I did have this once where a contract was broken and the buyer, which I represented, said, well, what about my $5,000? I said, well, what $5,000? The $5,000 the sellers were going to give me. Now I had it all spelled out, but she didn't quite read it and grasp it. So it took quite a while, and I think more than one phone call. She said, yes, but there's still $5,000 that they owe me. In the contract, it says they're going to give me $5,000. And I kept very politely saying, towards settlement, at the time of settlement. If there's no settlement, there's no 5,000, and it took a couple times. So you want to make sure. So for that reason, you want to make sure it's clear. So who's going to give what to who? Seller to provide buyer with a dollar amount. Sometimes I see percentages in there. That's okay, but if it gets negotiated different, the last thing you want is your buyer to be shorted by how much money they need to settle. So let's say you've calculated they need $7,200 and you've done it as a percentage and calculated, and well, we need 5.5% or whatever, and it gets renegotiated and the price gets reduced. Well, it's still going to be a percentage. So let's say it got reduced $20,000 because of, I don't know, an appraisal issue. Your buyer's not going to have enough settlement help that they need. So I would rather have a dollar amount. So where, as a new agent, do you get that? You're going to get that from your friendly neighborhood mortgage rep, whoever pre-qualified them. You're going to talk, and this is a very normal, average conversation with a mortgage rep. Hey, so-and-so, I've got the buyers. We're writing something up. Listen, I know they're going to need settlement help. Could you just tell me about what they're going to need? Well, they're probably going to need at least 8,000, but with this and that, I would ask for 8,200. Good. That's what you're going to put in there, 8,200. And then I always add at the time of settlement. That's when it's due. And to be used towards the buyer settlement costs at the time of settlement. So I put in who's given what to who, how much, why, and when. Now you've got a good clause. But talk about being creative, and I'll do a quick story here. Years ago when the market was super hot, I was working with a retired gentleman from Philadelphia, and he was actually worked for the local Philadelphia TV station as a cameraman his whole life up there in Philly. And he was actually one of the original TV cameramen for Dick Clark's American Bandstand when it was still in Philly. It's pretty cool. And Chief Halftown and all those. I mean, he knew all those folks. So he was retiring to Delaware. Now, get this, his mom is still alive at the time and was moving with him. And he was very much in deference to his mother. He's 65. So we found a house that matched all his needs. And again, we wanted mom, who was older than 65, to come and live with them too. But I knew this house, it just came on the market. I could see how well it really matched this gentleman, what he was looking for. And I knew it wasn't going to be there very long. And he kept saying, well, I can't put an offer in until my mom looks at it. And I was saying, listen, I'm not trying to push you or persuade you, but I'm telling you from my experience, this house won't be here in 24 hours. I'm not trying to, sell you in any way. I just know from experience, this house, this market, right now at this price, it's not going to be here in 24 hours. So I suggested creative writing. So I typed in, this offer is subject to approval by the buyer's mother inspecting the house for suitability. Did I get a phone call from the listing agent? I sure did. And the listing agent pretty much said, what? And I explained it to him. But I got the offer in. Now, what happened? We didn't get the house. Not because of that clause, but because, like I said, there were 8 other offers that came in 24 hours. So he was not, out of the 8, his offer was good, it was strong, but he wasn't the top offer for whatever reason. So we didn't get the house. But at least he was in the game. And if we didn't have that clause, that ridiculous clause in there, we couldn't even put the offer in. That's what pacified the buyer to move forward. Okay. So it's okay to be creative in there. If you're going to think you're being really creative, run it by me. I'll be glad to help you and phrase it out and give you ideas and tell you if you're off base or not. Okay, miscellaneous. Delaware law governs this agreement. That's important to know. And why is that? That's just like, well, that makes perfect sense. But you could explain this to your buyers, and it's good to show your knowledge a little bit. Let's just say the house is in Delaware. The buyers are from New Jersey, very common. The sellers are now living in Florida and selling their Delaware house. So that says that if this all goes to heck, it's not going to be governed by New Jersey laws because the buyer's from there. It's not going to be governed by Florida laws. And in fact, Florida and New Jersey laws are not applicable. It's going to be governed by Delaware laws because that's where the house is. Very simple. Okay. Have there been any changes? No. Usually not. Here's where the buyers are going to sign. So your buyers will sign here, and you want to date it. If you think there's going to be multiple offers, it's not a bad idea to put a time in there. Now, I'll say this. If you're using dotloop or something similar to that, Right Signature, DocuSign, which are electronic signature forms, and that's fine, it will stamp the date and time on there. Should the seller flat out reject it, you're going to ask for this signed here. But now this is all needed. The listing broker, don't worry about the code. The branch office, if there is one, the phone number, fax number. I'm not sure what a fax is, but it does say, let me see, it does say email there too. It's hard to see with this blue. Who the sales associate is. So normally what you're going to do is, and you want to fill this in. So the listing broker, it's the same as the seller's disclosure, but here's the information for the attorneys and such, and mortgage reps and all that to get a hold of people. So you're going to put in Long and Patterson or whatever it was. If there's a branch office, you could put in Newark, Long and Patterson, Lewis, Long and Patterson, Camden, something like that. You could put that in there. You want to put in the main office phone number. If there's an email address, I usually put in an email address of the sales associate. And then right here, you're going to put in the sales associate's name. And the selling broker, that's you. So just as a listing, selling broker. Now, it may sound like the selling broker would be who is selling the house. But no, it's because you've got the sale. So the selling broker here, you're going to put in eXp Realty. The branch office, you don't have to put in anything, but you know, that's, of course, don't put in cloud. That'll just confuse people. But the office phone number, our main office phone number is this until further notice. That's the main office number. We have to have a main office number for the state of Delaware. Fax number, you could put in this. But I wouldn't. You're going to put an email address, and I would put in, you know, your official email address. I like using my eXp Realty one. Just looks a little more official in there for that type of thing. And then down here, we're going to put in your name as agent, and JT should be capitalized. Well, just leave it like that. And your phone number. And I like putting in. Whoops. And even though it's a phone number, I like putting in because this is information for paralegals, attorneys, mortgage reps, the other side. I like putting in right in there. Okay, when the deposit was received, and that's it. So the bulk of it, and we are doing this under an hour, and I have taught this in well over an hour. The bulk of it's up here in these pages here. You want to be careful with this. This is what's included, what's not included, the finance contingency. When is the settlement? Oh, as a new agent, how I get the question, well, how long should I have for settlement? In this day and age, 6 weeks is about a good number. And you don't have to have it on, there's some agents who just want to have it on the last Friday of the month. There is some financial benefit to your buyer by having it later in the month than earlier in the month, but you just need to settle whenever you can, as soon as you can. The financial benefit is because of prorating. They'll prorate it. So if, let's say, you settle on October 1st, there may be 30 days of proration. If you settle on October 30th, there's 1 day of proration. So it's not a big savings. You know, whatever the proration might be for, whether it's a utility or rent, not rent, mortgage or property taxes, things, usually property taxes, things like that. So the other thing is understand how attorneys work and how other real estate agents work. Very often out of laziness, they just put a Friday, and they'll pick a Friday. And think about this, almost all the agents do this, especially the last Friday of the month. You know, real estate attorneys, they walk around with they're so busy on that last Friday of the month. I joke with them that they're walking around with an oxygen mask in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other hand just to get through the day. So I like, and other than the last Friday, Fridays in general. So you may get there on Friday at 4 o'clock and they've already had 3 settlements and they're backed up. And what happens, your buyer goes through a settlement that the attorney's talking like this: are you the buyer, are you the seller? Okay, this document over here does this, this does that, that does this. And they're just so, oh, we don't have that printed. Do you have that done? Can you print that out now? Because they're doing so many settlements, they're in a frenzy, the paralegal and the attorney. I started years ago scheduling settlements on a Thursday or a Wednesday. And instead of that frenzy, it's more like, hey, JT, these are your buyers. How are you? Would you like some coffee or a bottle of water or something like that? We have some mints up at the front desk. Feel free. And it's much more relaxed, much more organized, much more together. Even things like getting they have to produce the settlement sheet in a certain amount of time, but getting those things done earlier, I've just found it a lot. So my tip, just advice, I'd settle on some other date than Friday, especially the last Friday of the month. So if they need to do it at the end of the month, do it on a Tuesday or a Wednesday or something like that. So about 6 weeks is normal right there. If you want to push it to 7. The one thing I like doing too, and this is just another tip, if there's going to be multiple offers and what you're doing is you want to do a little marketing with this too. So very often not very often, all the time, I will call the listing agent up. And if my buyers are flexible, I'll ask, do your sellers have any preferred settlement date? And very often I may get, oh, I'm glad you asked because they've been living in this house for 30 years. They're really worried about getting everything packed up. So yeah, if we could settle in 8 weeks or 9 weeks, boy, they'd love that. Okay, well, if my buyers can do that, we could put in a different date. We could put in, instead of 6 weeks, we could put in 7 or July, otherwise, the end of July, and give them an extra 4 weeks. That's going to make for a stronger offer. And when you submit the offer, I would talk to that listing agent and just say, hey, listen, my buyers were flexible. They are in a month-to-month lease, so they'll take an extra month lease payment. But to accommodate your sellers, we've put the settlement date to July. Now, what did you do? You did something nice for them. And what happens when you do something nice for someone in general? They want to do something nice for you. It's going to make it they're more likely to agree to a price. So let's just say you're coming in $5,000 under, $10,000 under. The listing agent and the sellers may both agree, well, look, I know this is, $5,000 under the list price, but they're willing to wait till the end of July. And you have to do all that packing because, you've been here 30 years. And the sellers may say, yeah, let's take it because I'd rather have the extra time and not worry about the $5,000. That's a scenario you may get. So think a little bit about the settlement time. Always, as a good practice, call the listing agent and just say, and here's the way I usually like to present it, because I don't want to get the listing agent all excited. Or that sometimes they may call the sellers and get them all excited. So what happens if you call and say, hey, I have an offer coming in. What do your sellers have any preferred settlement date? And he tells them, and they tell you. And then your buyers say, we've been thinking about it. This one's 5 bedrooms. We really just need 4 bedrooms. Whatever, they want to back out of that offer, which is fine. They didn't sign anything yet. So that's legit. But in the meantime, you've told the listing agent that you've got an offer coming in. So guess what? 2 days later, the listing agent's calling her the next day or that night. You got the offer done yet? When's the offer coming in? I want to know because I'm going away, or I want to present it to myself. Yeah. Well, there's been a change of plans. So the conversation I usually have is, hey, we showed your house. I showed your house a couple days ago. My buyers have it on their short list, but they haven't made a decision yet. And really, the decision is that they haven't signed this yet. So I would just say, I just want to know, before we do anything, do your sellers have any preferred settlement date? Because I'd love to accommodate them if we could. That's your conversation in there. So I would say it's on their short list. And if you do have to call a listing agent, I again would be very careful just not to get everybody worked up about saying I have an offer coming in. You don't have an offer to those buyers. Sit down with this document and sign it. So also understand, and we're right at an hour, so I'm going to break this up here or stop this. They need to initial it here too. So they're going to need to initial every page. And again, last thing, print this out, read this through. This is your lifeblood right here. This is what gets you going. You want to understand and know these contracts really, really well. All right, that's an hour. I hope it was worth your while on how to fill in these blanks, and I gave you some tips and advice here. So I thank you, and I'll see you at the next lesson.